I did the self-assessment article, and so the idea of making sure students know scoring rubrics and such. So, and this is not original by me, I've used this before. The idea of sports car, sedan, the clunker, and the car that's up on blocks. And if I could draw, I would have drawn them, but otherwise I'd go find a picture of a really cool car. And I kind of followed the 6 traits of convention, so like with my sports car, it's a Jaguar, so 6 is an XKE. Talked about having great lines, clean body, 8-cylinder overhead cam, glass packs, sporty, exciting, it's a smooth ride, like on a cloud, no dents, no scratches. All the way to up on blocks, it's my husband's 1976 Chevy sitting in the backyard. It's not on blocks, but it's definitely not moving. Pieces of the truck are missing, the tree is growing through the floorboards. There's no battery with a full charge. It is, springs are shot and Bondo is king, so. Anyway.
Awesome.
Well, it's like, it's not original.
But it's really cool. It's a great idea.
I mean, I use the pictures.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, the 6 trait thing is original. I just did that today. I usually just use the pictures we talk about, but I'm also doing some stuff with 6 traits, and so I thought, well, I'll see if I can do the 6 traits going through that, and it worked out okay.
Yeah.
So.
That's great.
Okay, I want to go next.
Awesome.
Okay, I'm really excited about mine. I read the article, The View from Somewhere, and when I first read that, it was when we had our unique conversation about rubrics, which provided me with lots of opportunity for reflection. And so what I've got here is the story. Did anybody else read that article for their thing that they did today? But it's about how to get improvement and how to evaluate your student writing and how to get the most improvement. So it describes 2 different ways to get improvement and to evaluate your student writing. The idea of utilizing a rubric and the idea of conferencing with your students. And can you guess which one is the rubric?
Black one.
The black one, yeah, I use black and white for symbolic purposes because they made it seem like, you know, you use one or the other. But the reality is, I think we both know that if you wanted to get the big star at the end, it would be a good idea to do a combination of both. Through the conversation process, you know, you're going to get those growth moments. It might take a little bit longer. There may be twists and turns, but you'll end up being able to evaluate your student work. Just the idea of how you get there and maybe some of the benefits of utilizing that conferencing along with the rubrics. So,
Oh, I like that.
thank you.
Very cool.
Bet you can figure out what my learning style is.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I read the Looking at Student Work, and it was just talking about, basically PLC teams rather than teachers. A lot of times they look at their students' work just to prove that they're making it or they got it, rather than needing to talk to see how they can improve. So immediately I thought of like a comic strip, and this is the gods or the people on the top yelling down on us saying all students must meet or reach the standards, said in a deep, powerful voice. And then this is the PLC team, and then there's the dark side with the dark colors. And the dark side is saying must attain our predetermined goals. Either they got it or don't, then we'll mark it off as data. We'll look, and then the bright side says we'll look at everything. How can we move the learner forward to improve our teaching? It is a process.
Oh,
That's how I feel.
Dark side, I like that.
Because I feel like so easily, so many of us sometimes fall into the dark side. So we gotta come back.
We feel pressured to be on the dark side.
Yes, we feel pressured by her.
Deep, powerful voice. I kind of paraphrased the self-assessment one. I did a comic, but it's an audio comic because there's voices. So, yeah. I got a teacher on one side and then their class on the other. The teacher says, "Today, class, we'll be self-assessing our writing assignment." And then the smart aleck student says, "Dude, I finally got an A on a paper." And then the teacher says, "Actually, it's not going to count as a grade, but will help evaluate your progress and help to revise your work." "Dude, my assessment is that my writing is totally awesome already and needs no revision." A well-thought-out rubric will be used to provide you with constraining your creativity. In fact, you're all gonna help create the rubric. Dude, so you're saying I can follow a rubric and still make my writing better? That's cool. And then another student says, dude, what's cool is you stop saying dude.
I did the self-assessment one too, and I said recipes for self-assessment. Please be advised, this will only provide you with the main ingredients. Feel free to make it your own. However, remember this will result in improvements. This is not an evaluation. Please see rubrics for recipes for evaluation. Then ingredients, rubrics, patient teacher, student work, patient students, clear expectations, determination, and time. Directions: prepare rubrics to assess student work. Students create a rough draft. Students use rubric to monitor toward meeting the standards. 4 is revise the first draft based on the identified areas of improvement. Do not skip this step. 5, provide additional parent-teacher feedback. Wielding is a much more powerful word. And 6, your final draft. I understand how I've grown. I am still growing.
Well, that's awesome.
I'm going to share some background information. I never grew up playing a remote control. In my family, it was the Power Stick. I think that's probably not uncommon, but just in case. So I read the article, Feed Up, Feed Back, Feed Forward, and so I made the We Have the Power Stick. Apparently, my dad trained me well. So you have your power button here. It's the Feed Up or power button. Know your goals, establish a purpose, and then you'll more effectively be able to wield this power stick. And then there's a select button, and it says think carefully about which goals or purposes you wish to focus on before you select your lessons. A thoughtful plan will always pay off in student thinking and understanding. There's a rewind, or this button is the feedback. It causes you to rewind your thinking to consider new choices and decisions in your writing and thinking about concepts. And then this button is the feed forward. It allows you to look ahead or fast forward to where you hope your students can and will be as writers and thinkers. This check your understanding button allows you to pause to ensure that students are understanding concepts. Very powerful. So there's your.
Elaine, can we get a picture of that and have that up on our wiki? That is awesome.
Oh, well, thank you. My dad will be so proud.
Although in
You have power.
we didn't call the Power Stick is much better than the Zapper. Remember the Zapper? That is really cool. That's something kids could relate
Thank
to.
you.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
It is copyrighted. I put that. Patent pending. See that.
That's funny.
I'll go next. I just did a brochure of the self-assessment using the rubrics. And I started out with the common misconception that self-assessment equals self-evaluation. And the big point in the article is that they're two different things. So the reality, self-assessment is formative, so students reflect on and revise their work. And the big difference with evaluation is that it's summative and also linked to a grade. And then it talked about 3 different steps for self-assessing. So first is setting clear expectations, so creating rubrics with the students, analyzing writing samples with them, with the class listing the qualities of writing, and then later the teacher or with the class they can determine the criteria. And then while they conduct self-assessment, they can monitor their progress during the drafting stage. And I also liked the idea of color coding the evidence. So if they're specifically focusing on sentence fluency, they could use a certain color to note that in their piece. And then they can also focus on maybe one trait of writing at a time. And then for the revision, they can use their color coding for the different writing traits, and then write their revised draft to reflect their observations. And then I just summarized the benefits. So students will value the self-assessment once they get used to the process. They're more likely to self-assess and revise. It improves the quality of the writing, and it also described how it can be used in other content areas.
I like your fonts.
Well, Jill talked about her learning style, which is obviously very, very creative, and mine is very, very not. I did the same self-assessment article, and for me, the basic gist of the article was that rubrics were not just for teachers, And then, you know, it talks, but as Amber just mentioned, about the evaluative versus informative. And then I was pulling out and organizing in my brain some of the things that were main concepts here, which was the student use equals student improved performance, that it encourages an active learning, some of the things she was talking about, that it provides clarity of thought, encourages revision and improvement, and that student-created rubrics lead to increased awareness and increased investment in the process.
Well, wait until you see. There's no great thing to hear too, just So I was really looking at students' work, and I was thinking, since we are in the middle of a unit of poetry, to compose 2 poems, limericks, which is the 5 lines, 1, 2, and 5 rhymes, and then the 3 and 4 will rhyme differently. So here we go. There once was a group of talented teachers who researched assessments like true believers. They looked to prove students are learning, while others improved their practice through reflecting that proving or improving group of teachers. So here is one. I thought about circular ending, when you take a line and then you end up with the same exact line, and it's free verse. Spending a lot of time proving students are getting it is when teachers focused on learners' individual scores. They spend time finding, adapting, and creating assessment that can give back positive results. That group of teachers spending a lot of time proving students are getting it. So something like this, very simple. Within the time, 30 minutes.
Sorry, somebody's got to be the Nazi.
I read the self-assessment through rubrics article, and basically I employed a strategy that I encourage with my own students a lot, because I give my students a lot of complex text and really emphasize the importance of annotation and utilizing various strategies to make sure they're interacting with the text and processing it appropriately. Then along those same lines, we're very big on sort of like idea generation, making sure kids are developing their own unique ideas, broadly speaking like a thesis. I get into a lot of arguments and disagreements about the difference between a thesis and a thesis statement. I think there's value in the thesis statement, but you know, that's where you sort of compress it to 1 or 2 sort of sentences, but I think a thesis can be sort of integrated throughout the entire body of a text. So anyway, having said all that, one of the things I often encourage kids to do whenever they get a complex text in finding the thesis or the main idea, is to write the thesis out on the side, and then either pull direct quotes or paraphrase quotes of what they consider to sort of be the main argument, the main ideas in the text. So for this, tools such as rubrics are effective in supporting self-assessment. H, having clear expectations articulated by teachers, students, or both is essential. E, effective feedback is a key element of formative assessment. S, self-assessment is formative, self-evaluation is summative. I, if students can produce it, they can assess it, and if they can assess it, they can improve it. And S, self-assessment provides feedback to guide revision. Kind of pull those out as sort of the main purposes or ideas.
Okay, but could you go back to the directions you give your kids when you have them do that? Anybody else intrigued by this? Pause. Seriously?
So yeah, so it's just this idea of making sure you're like interacting and processing the text,
right,
as opposed to just simply reading it.
Sure.
And so in wanting to pull out the main idea from it, if a thesis is like another word for the main argument, you write thesis and then you pull specific quotes or paraphrases that.
So they make sort of an acrostic every
Yes.
time off of the word thesis.
Yes.
Maybe not every time,
Right.
but
And that's just
multiple
one
times.
strategy. I mean,
Right.
we really want them to annotate in the manner that makes sense to them. So we try to provide them with a bunch of different strategies.
Right.
They find the ones that.
This is just one I hadn't used before.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, thank you.
Cool.
All right. We have rewind now.
I will go. I also did the self-assessment through rubrics, how it can work for you. And I kind of focused on how it can work for you because it hasn't worked for me in the past. I teach third grade, and it's really hard. Third graders think that what they write is great and perfect, and there's no need for revision regardless of how you approach, please let's try to revise. And they get really sort of offended when you, in a normal third grade way, and you suggest that change needs to be made. And I think that my mistake along the way has been in conference with them after the district assessments or whatever, you know, the rubric has been connected with a grade. And that's what hit home with me in the perhaps that's where I have miscommunicated to them how a rubric can be used for them. So that's sort of the take I used in my brochure. So, and we're going to have to really practice this because with the Common Core we have many, many, many rubrics they're going to have to be familiar with. So.
I made a little fortune. It's for the self-assessment for the rubrics, and then each area. I guess I have to hold it to it. The first flap was setting the stage. Create a rubric that is not overly narrow, overly task-specific. Goal is improvement, so don't count it as a grade to avoid. I didn't have enough room, so I drew a big balloon with an A. Is really a little balloon with a C paper, so they don't inflate their little egos. Number 2 is the dress rehearsal. Set clear expectations, list of qualities, support with facts, make sense, good beginning, middle, and end. Allow students to check their own work for this, maybe with color for each area needed. The third part is opening night, revise. Students should use feedback from the self-assessment to guide the revisions, make notes of what's good, what's bad. As an educator, you must make time for the revisions or students won't want to waste their efforts. And then the last one is the reviews are in. A pain but totally worth it, an experience that must be had to fully be understood by students, creating ownership of their work. And it's a little chill.
I love that.
I love your titles, that's awesome.
I am not that creative. I did a concept map also, and I think I just realized that I didn't even do it on Mark. So I don't have one printed. I don't know if it is or not. It's on formative assessments.
Perfect.
But I listed, there were 3 stages, and I listed those over here to the side and just kind of quick summarized it. And then formative assessments, you share info, which leads to communication, which empowers the students and teachers are more effective. For formative assessments, you're sharing your understandings, students are thinking for themselves, and it increases in achievement, motivation, the time on the task, and you just work on improving your feedback. There's intensified record keeping, emphasis on communication, and then goals would be to give more guidance to the students, and then your feedback is tied to your learning targets. So, sorry.
No.
No, that's
Perfect.
yeah.
Mine's on looking at student work, and I just did a cause and effect. The first one I did as the improving approach. It's light because it's bigger, it gets less results, it's less space, it takes less time. The improving approach is darker, it's more concrete, or not concrete, but it's shows more improvement, more increase in student learning. So my colors have, and my spacing has a little bit to do with it also. Starts out talking about how it's vague and that we are all independently working and we just have a goal that's just kind of general and out there. And then we create assessments to show that we can prove that the students that got it. And then that those teachers are typically bent on proving that the student's behavior or life is the outcome that they're going to get no matter what I do, so why bother? So then the result is the same students that always are wherever they are continually wherever they are. And then I did the improving approach, which talks about not only just my teaching, but also the student learning. We build assessments to understand the student's thinking, to try to drive what do I need to help the student understand better. The concentration here is how do we build a good system, how do we have good models so that our functions are well throughout the building. We try to get to the true knowledge and the concepts behind what students have. Therefore, we have an understanding and explore the students' misconceptions along with what they have learned. Therefore, we develop lessons out of that assessment to address those misconceptions. then the students that have it, and the students with misconceptions are addressed, and all students.